The first tap of a conductor's wand. The first rivet in a mile-high tower. The master link at the genesis of a never-ending chain. The moment a single empty canvas meets a singular master stroke. There is no one thing. Because now, there are many. Because soon, there will be more. Because one is ever the beginning. Like the first link in an infinite chain, or the first rivet in the tallest skyscraper. The master stroke is found in the masterpiece. What will you begin?
Hello there. Welcome to the 81st episode of the World Blockchain Roundtable. Our host for today, we've got Lisa Mighty Davis, Team Mighty organizer and owner of the new Mighty layer over on Den.Social. Satoshi Shan, entrepreneur and everyone's friend. Nice checkered shirt you got there for us there, sir. Greg from Rivet, who you know from this show as well. Taco Cat. I'm just going to comment on everyone's shirt and say what you're wearing.
Palindrome.
I was going to say, I feel a little left out.
I got to go back and compliment Stripes. The Stripes are looking
you.
Good on you there, Lisa. Also, we have Joe, founder and architect of Dragon Chain, who is cold and wearing Dragon Chain merch and a jacket.
Night.
And I'll be a master of ceremonies today. I am Dave, U.S. Navy veteran and Den.Social person. So
wearing a nice Bitcoin shirt and a backwards hat, of course.
Yeah, that's what really all that was about, was to get you to compliment my Bitcoin shirt. Oh man, I had a Monero thing up behind me too, but I didn't turn off my screensaver. It looks like
you might get banned for
that. Oh man, the things that people get banned for these days. Now, before we roll into our opening politics segment, our opening current events segment. We'll have a quick update on the WBRT layer ownership tokens distribution from last week. So each host will receive 133 lot. Each topic contributor from last week will receive 55 lot. And last week's original theme was on IoT, was nominated by Jacob Wayne, who will receive an additional 55 lot for nominating that topic. And these tokens that I'm talking about, they come with perpetual passive income, free edits in the layer, and governance votes, which is, to me, the most important thing, because that's what drives the show and decides what we talk about. So thanks for participating in all that, and enjoy your new tokens. Theme for this week, blockchain architecture, one of my favorite things to talk about. I don't know about you guys, but I just like looking at how things are made and the different choices that people go with, and for different reasons, and things like that. So we'll see what we get to pick apart today.
Cool.
Okay, there's the intro. About current events, what are we thinking? What do we want to talk about? There's so much going on. It's like
something big has to be happening because they're covering it all up with Brittany Griner drama. So something else must be happening that's more significant to us. I would guess.
So much,
absolutely. Yeah. Well, there's always the discovery of what's his name, the guy. Was it who's the name of the attorney, the general counsel at Twitter? It's like.
I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, hang on.
Lay it on us.
Are you talking about Sam Bankman-Fried's attorney that you for
must fire
James Baker?
Fired with
Baker. It was exactly. So he was the assistant general counsel at Twitter. And
that's right. And he got exited. That's right.
Yeah, now he got exited because, and get this, he was. I mean, I'm guessing what they did when they kept him on board was stick him in a room by himself, right? Quiet little side room where he couldn't cause any trouble, but to keep him around just in case they needed to ask questions. And apparently he was leaving that little side room to walk over to the room where they were vetting the Twitter files. And he was curating what was getting sent to Taibbi and to who's the other one they had it going to?
I'm not sure, but I didn't know that part.
Oh yeah,
that part. I read some of that. So he was that snail pace Twitter drop. I don't know if you were watching it as it was
Barry
coming
Weiss
out.
was the other reporter.
It was being curated by Baker.
Yeah,
basically.
and the way that Taibbi said it is, he saw, he found out who it was, and he's like, my jaw dropped, because this guy was also central to the Russiagate scandals, like the fake Russiagate thing,
which was the meat of what they were trying to protect. When they're banning DMs, there's something up.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that's what like, I mean, I got fired up in 2008 along with a lot of people.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize how bad it, I didn't willingly dig deeper into how bad it really was until I personally got censored in DMs and in like, just for simply asking a question about like, hey, have you guys seen this? Like for a while there, we weren't even allowed to ask if it was real or not.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Not
allowed it. Like, I think even the press secretary got her Twitter account turned off for a minute. Like it was nuts. And that was, it's weird. It's like this, it's probably related to the Streisand effect or something, but when you do something like that and you show your hand or you operate something so overtly like that, it makes a lot of people who maybe wouldn't have paid attention start paying attention.
Yep.
I think that goes back to what Joe was saying before we got started about when he used to go watch Trump's posts on Reddit, and you could vote it up, and it would take it right back down. The manipulation.
It was really hilarious.
And when it's in your face like that, it's a little jarring to think like, oh, I thought we lived in America.
Yep. Yeah. But like, I personally, I don't know about you guys, but I was actively in different Telegram channels at the time, trying to have a conversation outside of Twitter with what was going on Twitter. And sharing that story was something that I read that you couldn't get away with without getting banned. So, as soon as I saw the story, I was off on Telegram talking about it, but it inevitably suppressed. Right. Yeah. Even if the Streisand effect was in play, it inevitably suppressed knowledge of it.
Definitely. Because a lot of people didn't see it because it wasn't on in the mainstream press at all. So a normal person who's, listening to the radio on the way to work or something wouldn't have heard about it. The other one, there was a week or at least a few days during 1 week where you would get your account on Twitter would get suspended if you posted an NPC meme. Which you think about that, they were actually scared that meme was going viral, that all of the media are just copying each other and people are just copying what the media is telling them to.
Isn't it weird?
I remember in the beginning when it was obvious to me where everything was going. They were banning Twitter accounts because if you posted a learn to code. There's all these journalists.
We
just learn to code. Haha, it's a trolling thing. Not political. It's just kind of a mean joke, but it's a joke. And people are losing their accounts for that.
Well, and I mean, but the thing
it's also more than a mean joke, right?
Because they're
actually people who, like, my 82-year-old grandma learned to code actually when she wanted to get her digital artwork out there. She felt like the need to learn to make her own site, right? So
you realize it was because it was it was an intended the press, the media, I should say, prior to that, when people would say, well, all of the manufacturing jobs are no longer here in the U.S., and the media was telling all white males, learn to code, get over it. And this was the response back when all of those same media people were laid off because nobody freaking listens to them anymore. Right. Yeah. That's why it was so blatant and in their face, and they really don't like it. I think
it showed how much control they had over the information faucet that we all, drink from, that you just hurt someone's, that group's feelings, and everything was, like the iron hammer came down. The gauntlet fist punch you in the face, and that was such a little thing, and that was like a wake up call for me. I was like, oh my god, this is. Imagine if people said something like meaningful or insightful or
You can't anymore. And frankly, it's the weirdest thing historically for me is that in the future, we're going to look back and we're not going to see the likes of what we had in the past with philosophers writing books, writing pamphlets, for
having independent
war
thought.
for independence. It is literally going to be memes, because that is the only way that you can cut through all the bullshit censorship, and you can actually, because it's funny, it just cuts right through, and it's like, oh, I get that, it's funny, and
and it also hits on the highest level of. So if you look at the way that the human mind works, right, the highest level cognitive capabilities that we have as human beings are our sense of irony and our sense of humor. Right. That's something that is going to be, when you finally train AI to understand it, and you would actually be able to censor it based on that, you're going to already have like the singularity happening, because if you train a computer to understand irony, then you've trained a computer to think at the highest levels of human capacity.
Yeah. Right? Well, the funniest thing too, though, is anytime they attempt to teach a computer to understand things like that, the AI tends to turn extremely racist and anti-Semitic overnight. So it's just this really strange thing that might not be doable. So, I don't know.
Well, I feel like they'll get there, but
not many people talk about that being the highest level. Octopi, they have that level of intelligence of humor. I don't know if you ever heard this story, and this blew my mind. This is a marine biologist at like a SeaWorld or something, and he went and fed the octopus, and one of the fish was a bad fish. It is a true story. This is real. And he went back to his he was at his desk, and the bad fish hit him in the head and dropped onto his desk.
He threw the fish at him?
The octopus took the bad fish, got out of his cage, went down the hall, found his office, and threw the bad fish at him. And then they started talking about that's the highest level of intelligence, is humor. And and I was like, oh my, it's nuts, man. That really blew my mind.
Yep.
Even if that wasn't true, I prefer to believe that it is, because it's hilarious. It probably did happen. Octopi are like some interesting creatures.
Is my question. Like, how could the octopus be ironic with its dead fish?
He fed the dead fish back to the guy.
Oh yeah, he fed it back to him. Okay. There we go. No, that's definitely irony.
Talking about memes and stuff, isn't it funny, if it weren't so maddening, that like it seems like some of the stuff that was banned for a while there, like the Pepe frog and stuff like that, was like, it's being from a culture that's being misunderstood. Like, it's so obvious that people that get it, that like get that it's a meme, that get that it's a joke, also that there's a message there, sure. But the way it was being applied was like when Library had that interaction with, was it Apple, about the Pepe imagery in one of the videos. And they were like, hey, you got to take down the Pepe thing. And they were like, this is literally a YouTube video that was auto imported from YouTube, that's still on YouTube, on the YouTube app. Why are you going after us with this shit? First of all. But second of all, it's a fucking cartoon frog, people.
Exactly. And or were meant ironically, right? In 90% of the time that you see it, you're seeing somebody making a tongue-in-cheek joke. And it's interesting too. Like, you even saw like all the people hating on the bored apes and the grandpa apes and whatever else, right? Which I think are hysterical. A lot of those art projects were put out there kind of tongue-in-cheek, right? Like, yes, it's bad art. We know that's kind of the joke. And people who wanted to critique it were just refusing to see the irony, which made it more ironic.
Yeah, part of me just wants to say, like, people, if you're gonna like censor stuff, like, do it right and understand what you're doing. You're so reactionary that it's obvious that you're just like running around with your head cut off or something.
Well, on that same note, right? Like Vijaya Gaddy or whoever, the head censor over at Twitter before she got fired. She was talking about, apparently on an interview, the removal of Babylon Bee, and And they were talking about how that kind of satire wasn't funny and was dangerous somehow. It's like
dangerous.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I would say I don't, and it is it results in a Streisand effect, but I still have yet to see a case historically, and I'm probably missing something where censorship wasn't applied to something that was actually untrue.
That's
right?
a really you said that, and that was very profound. It's a profound thing you thought up there.
I mean, it's like, and I think that should be our key. That if something is being censored, then it's
a
either
high probability,
true or has a high probability of being true, and we should look at it because why else would they be censoring it? There'd be no reason.
Oh yeah, because they didn't censor their own misinformation, right? Like we now know.
I used to tell my kids that if somebody was like picking on you, like he said that I was a wimp, or he said that I was stupid, and I was like, well, what if he said you were a truck? And they're like, that's dumb. Are you a truck?
Yeah.
No, would you care if he called you a truck? No, that's dumb.
Right.
Like, are you a wimp? Are you whatever? It's like, no, it's the same thing, man.
If someone called me a truck, I'd take it as a compliment.
If you're worried about it, you're making a big deal out of it. It's just if it was blatantly not true, you wouldn't care. So yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, what was the other really interesting one to me was how they were censoring all of the misinformation. And all of the stuff that they were putting out is now completely proven to be true. Like we know for a fact that that even the really advanced, medical grade life vests were not supposed to be or are not effective at preventing dryland drowning. Right?
But there are people saying it says right here on the box that it's not. It says here on the box of the life vest, it says it doesn't work.
Right. Even the N95 life vests now, though, have been proven to be ineffective.
Whenever, it's so frustrating.
Well,
when you say, here's this 100% proof, and they just get the glass-eyed and go, yeah, but yeah,
But that goes back to the, where's your link? Where's the... We won't, when you said, Joe, earlier, they're going to look back and we're going to just see memes, and there won't be these Aristotle and these great minds and thoughts, because no one's allowed to be validated in their independent thought without backing it up with a link. But then now we're learning we can't trust where these links are coming from. Yep. So like show me your source. Oh, that's from mainstream media, which we know is controlled by the CIA and is a narrative put out by our government to mislead us. So ultimately there is no truth.
Well, I mean, and you guys remember, everybody remembers Aaron Schwartz, right? Like what he was trying to do was to get academic articles out from behind paywalls so that everybody could access them.
Yeah, specifically the publicly funded ones at the very least.
Yeah, which is like 95% of them, right? And you have stuff going as far back as the Enlightenment, still censored behind or still hidden behind a paywall. Where you could, if you wanted to download and read like a paper by Galileo, you might have to pay $50.
Yes.
And people can't access those. So you have these people sharing even links to just the abstracts of these articles, because you can access the abstracts for free. And that's then the expert class would come back with access to the papers, of course, and pick apart the papers at a fine level of detail as a way to say, oh, look, you're wrong. This paper's bad. But nobody could have a counter argument because you weren't allowed to access that without having to pay through the nose.
Sounds like the Bible.
And by the way, you think about it, is the reason, I mean, one of the big, if you look into some of that most studies are not peer reviewed now, because tests aren't, everything else, because none of it's public. So unless you are in that class, you're not going to, so it's like their own damn problem. And they could just open source the damn papers, and they might get some peer review. It's freaking stupid.
Yep. Well, I mean, and the cool thing though too, a lot of people don't know about, right, is Sci-Hub. And if you don't know about Sci-Hub, you should check it out. Sci-Hub.se. Anytime you go on a journal page and you look for the citation details, look for the DOI number, and if you copy and paste that into Sci-Hub, it will unlock most papers for you. That's a pro tip. You can access these papers for the most part. They don't have everything post 2022, but everything 2021 and back for the most part you can get.
I've been thinking about the meme thing. Really kind of hit me because this week I've been thinking about how, I'm very negative. I'm very realist on where we're headed.
Well, if you're realist and we're headed somewhere negative, then I guess
right.
by default,
that's a good way to put it. Now, like with the elections, everyone's going to be this, it's going to do this. You have Carrie Lake, who has sold out in a little state, with a low population, sells out arenas, has a social media presence in hundreds of thousands. When the other person can't get 100 people in a room and has like a tenth of the numbers and loses. So a lot of things that just don't make common sense. But what I was interested in this week is, and I've talked about this with Lisa, I think I've mentioned it here, how it seems like the real guardians of free speech, the champions, the people that we look at are the comedians now. But like serious, like Rogan, like Russell Brand, Jim Brewer, all these people have the biggest platforms, and they're not really just telling jokes anymore. They're actually champions. Rob Schneider.
Do you think that is because they're able to go a little bit farther under the guise of art?
No, well, kind of. I think the reason
is also because they had previous access to,
and not even under the guise. It is art.
That we're in this crucible, and we're heading towards a very bad place. That's historically always been the same place in every empire that's fallen. We're right on track. Everything's textbook. Our art, our sexual proclivities, gender bending, everything is the same as Greek, Roman.
We don't have gluttony yet, which I'm looking forward to personally. Proper Roman style gluttony.
McDonald's exists.
No, that's not the same thing. When McDonald's adds a purge room where McDonald's employees massage you and help you vomit.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah,
that's when we get right to the edge.
I think we're headed for that. That'll just be a form of kink.
What was the feature on the
kink? It's everything's fine.
Gluttony bot or no?
Comedians throughout time, I think, have been the champions or the guardians of free speech. It just wasn't as blatant as it is now. That's where they were allowed to say anything.
Yeah, jesters could say whatever about the king, and it was, make fun of the king into his face.
Right, and you knew the king was going down if you ever had the jester executed, because the jester was usually saying stuff that the court was afraid to say.
Right. That's very true.
So then, if we're repeating cycles in history, the question that I would like to pose that's related to today's topic is how do we leverage what we have now that we didn't have then to not continue the same pattern over and over and over again? What can save us this time, and how can we use this technology to not be victim to the same outcome?
Gratitude to guys like Elon Musk, right? Like, we need to see more people behaving like that.
Yes,
willing to step forward and put their own reputations on the line, in order to fight back.
Yeah. Can I say something that because what Dave's talking about is it's actually pretty interesting, because I think that blockchain, cryptocurrency, this industry, this technology is oddly the unexpected technology. You look at all the sci-fi, they, even though they're prescient, even though they predict a lot of what we see, they don't predict that. There are a few predictions, like say by what's his name, the economist. I have his picture in my head. He predicted what is Bitcoin in the 80s.
You're talking about Friedrich Hayek,
right? Friedman?
Or Milton Friedman. There's Milton Friedman, Friedrich Hayek.
Yes, Hayek. Yeah, Hayek also. So the point is but in sci-fi, they really didn't predict this tech. And all of these cases with Orwell, I mean, blockchain can directly protect us against what Orwell predicted, what Huxley predicted, what a lot of these guys that, on the negative side of sci-fi predicted.
Well, I mean, that's what I think about. People start to use Dragon Chain Eternal, right, on Twitter to preserve things, and that kind of thing is heartening.
Well, that's what kind of scared me for a while. There was some of the things predicted in 1984. For example, were made easier by the centralization of data and how we've gone to electronic textbooks and things like that, where in Orwell's vision, the Ministry of Truth had to collect physically and destroy books and then reissue new versions of them, right? To control the narrative.
The memory hole was a place for literally burning pieces of paper.
And so one of the things that was like until Bitcoin came along, one of the things that was concerning to me was like how much easier that was made by electronic distribution of the written word.
There's a scary part of 1984 that people don't really talk about. The main character, Winston, what was his job?
It literally was getting the
memory hole and stuff.
I don't remember.
It was his job to erase history.
It's been a while. Was it?
And what we see today, right now, is somebody like Elon can take over Twitter and rescue things from the memory hole, right? But the 1984 situation was like the guy working on the memory hole couldn't even rebel.
The reason for the story, what caused everything, when the government had a fake pandemic.
Oh, right. Yeah. The same thing that was.
And then started the lockdown and took over. Yeah.
Well, you can think about it. Too.
My computer, I have a supercomputer now. Hasn't ever crashed. Ever. When I used to get knocked off before, I had a crap computer. I have a supercomputer now. Never crashed. And when I was talking about this stuff, it crashed. It's very weird.
Bro.
I was saying.
Well, can I tell you something too? I hadn't thought about this much, but imagine this: a person, let's call him Winston, lives in a small dorky apartment in San Francisco. Has a big screen in their living room. Is kind of solo. They're kind of a loner. They don't have many friends or anything. They go to work every morning in this place called Twitter. There's a big blue bird up there, and they literally sit there. They're probably in the legal or whatever the safety and information department is called. It's outsourced from what would have been Big Brother, and they literally were deleting fucking tweets and pointing out people that should be watched.
That was their job.
Watching them. That was literally their freaking job.
Have you guys seen the Leonardo DiCaprio Romeo and Juliet film where they have
it's a classic.
I would love to see 1984 given a similar treatment with modernization on the same story, just like Joe was rolling out just now.
You could do that. You could,
totally, and it would be super interesting to draw the parallels and to say like, no,
never
this
happened.
Is literally not even not even just conceptually.
Happened.
It's like literally, actually, that's just
independent.
What's happening.
Maybe if we created an independent film company, that could happen. That would be pretty. Brilliant.
Throw it on Kickstarter.
Yeah. There's a free idea for anybody who wants to go in and make it. Go for it.
Watching.
I remember Jacob Wayne has all the equipment to do it, right?
I love it.
You could actually just cut actual things.
Cool sci-fi movie because I like sci-fi and all that. But then now, you got to go watch old movies, even Porky's. Just watch it as an adult.
Porky's was.
It's
that was even rated. Was that rated R or was it rated PG-13?
It was R. That's why. I watched it for the boobs. And much about like racism and so many other like really deep things and fighting against it, inequality. And there's like, and it was Porky's, But that was what I was talking about earlier. That comedians have always been the guardians of free speech because they've always been the ones that are allowed to. We call it pushing the envelope and all these other things. And I think that journalists have always been guardians of the truth.
Yeah.
And when we made that corporate and allowed it to be owned and 100% for profit,
Right, 1998 was the year, right?
To where it could be corrupted, and now there is no truth anymore because there's no.
Well, I don't know if I agree
in
with
1998. The rule used to be that you couldn't have multiple publications owned by the same person.
Yeah,
and the DOJ would come after you for antitrust if you tried to buy too many media properties, and they would disallow the purchase. This stopped in 1998. The new precedent was set, and after that, you started having a consolidation to where like the same guy who was on the board at Nike could own CNBC and MSNBC or whatever, right? Like
I will tell you, looking back, even under Reagan, let alone anyone else, that the media wasn't telling us the truth. It was still spoon-fed.
We just didn't have an alternative outlet.
Yeah, I was gonna say Project Mockingbird admits in congressional hearings that the CIA feeds them what they're supposed to say back in the 60s.
And of course, they now say the Project Mockingbird got shut down. Bullshit, right?
And all that, all that stuff was active during as far back knowingly as the 30s and 40s too.
So on a really fun note, guys, have you seen ChatGPT yet?
I don't even know what that is.
It's the latest chatbot. I asked it the other day. Get this. I asked the prompt. I said, explain free speech in the style of a person who's afraid of what happens when people have an inalienable right to it. You want to know what it responded? It said, free speech is the idea that everyone has the right to express their thoughts and opinions without fear of punishment or reprisal. However, as a person who is afraid of what can happen when people have this inalienable right, I must admit that I'm concerned about the potential consequences of allowing everyone to speak freely. For example, if people are allowed to say whatever they want, they might use their words to hurt or harm others. This could lead to an increase in bullying, harassment, and other forms of abuse, which could have serious negative effects on the individuals and society as a whole. Additionally, free speech could be used to spread misinformation or propaganda, which could lead to confusion, distrust, and even violence. Overall, while free speech is an important principle, it must be balanced with the need to protect individuals and society from harm. Sound familiar? Yeah. This freaking AI just came up with the exact same line.
Can I tell you something else? You know what else is very interesting that we probably cannot go into depth here on, but that those very bots, and even the bots that just produce pictures, pretty, stupid, silly pictures that are very interesting, that how it comes up with something, are themselves censored. They have restrictions built into them so that people can't make them say certain things that would, that would be.
And GTP chat
they're
is in a
programmed
research phase.
by somebody. Yeah.
Or chat GTP is in a research phase right now, so they have a disclaimer on the front that this thing might be made to say, quote, harmful things. So
that's interesting. I hadn't thought about it that way,
when
Joe.
Those chatbots start yelling that there's a fire in a crowded theater. That's going to be the funny part to me. So
I hadn't thought of it that way, Joe. But yeah, it's like proactive censorship, where instead of having to be reactionary to it,
who believes there's no fire,
you create a system where it just can't produce things that have to be censored. That's interesting.
Yeah, the thing that bothers me about that line, though,
if you're a realist and you can see where things are going, and there was good intentions years and years ago, no bullying, anti-bullying, the whole I think it was Crowder, not what Crowder show.
Do you think that's really what anti-bullying's original intention was?
No,
it was always just to be manipulate you later with political correctness and censorship. It was always meant to be that.
Right.
The thing, words.
You think that's a good thing to make people softer?
Said what the AI said, when you said that if people are allowed to say what they want, it could harm or hurt.
Yep. We need to get back to the idea that
sticks and stones will break our bones,
right?
But words can never hurt me. Instantly, what came into my head, because that's what I was taught. I'm like this old, it's like armor.
Yeah.
Did you ever watch Flash Gordon? The epic.
Gotta have thick skin if you want to talk
Flash
in public.
Gordon.
Which Flash Gordon?
The Flash Gordon.
The 80s. The
Sam
80s
Jones.
one? Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Remember when they tried to mess with to erase Zarkov's head, his brain, and he was talking about how just like a song from the Beatles and all of these things, they armored his brain to where that their ray couldn't erase his mind. Literally the second you said that, instantly it was like a defense mechanism that came right to the front of my head. Sticks and stones will break my bones, and names will never hurt me. As soon as you said they can say whatever they want, they could harm or hurt someone. So I think that whole time, for the past, years and years, and it's paved with good intentions, because so many people are like, oh yes, gotta stop the bullying. And I have this friend of mine who's gay, super gay. He was a cheerleader in high school, which of course he wasn't allowed to be gay, but he's weird because he hates like drag queens. He always talks crap about all these, gay pride and stuff. And I'm like, Shane, you can't talk.
In a way, drag queen.
This is a long time ago. This is like years and years ago. I was like, dude, the gay Gestapo is going to come and take away your gay card. And he's like, I don't care. And he's like, he used to like yell at people who would, like they would, be like drag queens and dress up all, girly. He's like, I'm gay. I like dudes. This is my boyfriend. He looks like a man. That's what gay is. Why are you trying to look like a woman and you're attracted to this woman? That's not gay. You're just adding a penis to a woman. He's like, y'all are weird. And he always said, because it was just like beginning of the, super anti-bullying thing. And he was like, no, you got to bully kids. And I'm like, Shane, you're so weird. No, you can't bully kids. It's bad bullying. And he's like, no, man, if you stop, a basic bullying, little bullying, I'm not talking about beating kid up, but like that makes kids, tougher, and they learn to defend themselves. They learn to stand up for themselves, and they learn, you learn basic societal skills.
You learn to tolerate other points of view.
And you also
but
learn,
instead, video games now are offering little boys girl skins to put on.
Now, in fairness, I do typically play as women in video games for fun.
I do too.
I think it's more interesting to watch a badass woman beat somebody up with a sword. But
I do too every now and then.
I will say we got to get on the out of the.
Real quick though, I did want to touch on one more thing, if you guys don't mind. The fire in a crowded theater thing. You can't ever do that, and the theater stops you. That's not a good justification for government censorship.
Right.
The theater will throw you out. Like, why do we need the government
back in? Yeah.
That's
a free market there, isn't it?
I just wanted to, for anybody who was listening to what Sean was just saying and had an uneasy, weird feeling about it, because it's an awkward conversation. I just wanted to say that I grew up as a redneck, and then I lived like 7 years when I was in the Navy with gay roommates. And so in my experience, I've never heard anybody like as judgmental towards gay people as other gay people and rednecks. Like those are typically the demographics that talk the most shit about gay people. And I would say that, ironically enough, gay people do probably talk more shit about gay people than straight people. So Sean wasn't being misleading there at all. That's right. That's pretty typical in that community.
Similar to the people that are allowed to use the N-word, right? Like you're not allowed to use it if you're a white guy, but you're perfectly allowed to use it if you're a black guy.
That's what's dangerous when you're a white woman who raised a black child and people look at you and they don't know that about you.
Yeah.
And you've experienced, racism and watched it happen with your daughter or experienced it at you in different cultures, in many different situations from lots of different sides and lots of different colors of people directed at me. But then I don't have my daughter with me anymore. And anyway, and I'll say something that I experienced and it's like, you're not allowed to talk like that. You're not allowed to have that experience because I'm not black. And I was like, oh no, I had that shared experience raising my child.
That cultural appropriation is not a thing.
So,
it's not real.
Agreed.
Well, I also
think I always preface that by saying in the United States, because I'm an American, a lot of the things that I say and the way I feel and my beliefs are because I'm here. And this country was radically different than the rest of the world when it started. And the ideas were radically different. And I was raised, it's a melting pot. The whole reason why we're as awesome as we are is because other people came here and brought their cultures.
Right. And the amalgamation of cultures is what makes it a unique culture.
So you can't appropriate it. It's part of our culture is that. Our culture is not an appropriation, but a coming together of cultures. it's people don't separate it. They don't come here and say, hey, we're this way and you stay that way. No,
right.
We all came to, that's why we were as awesome as we were. And having grown up in Europe, it's just something that really strikes me
about it.
Is that
and appreciating all of the differences and all of the things together and being more together instead of dividing each other and saying, well, I'm more than, you have to be less than for me to be more than.
It requires, though, the how do I say, the racial or other diversity is meaningless if you don't have diversity of ideas. If you can't actually express the ideas that these other cultures might bring,
then there is no diversity.
Then it's pointless to have the other cultures.
Thus back to the censorship.
I was watching this new TV show. It's hilarious. It's like Pitch Perfect, the movie, but it's this TV show with Fula, who's hilarious. And then anyway, this guy goes over to Berlin and he's like sitting there. It's like a comedy, and he goes in. It's this old, the office really old, and like it's kind of falling apart. He was like, wow, this office is really old. He goes, oh, yeah, it's like 500 years old. He said, this office is old. Must be like 50 years old. Oh, it's like, 500 years old. And that's a real thing. Like, you could live in an apartment that's 500 years old in Europe. It's not that weird. I went, growing up in Europe, you go places that are 1,000 years old, and we don't have that here. We don't fathom that.
This gets into blockchain, though.
The depth of our country. No, but the depth of our
buildings have been removed from America on purpose.
But the depth of our history, Lisa, can only go back a couple hundred years.
But that's because they've been purposefully removed.
No, it's
to hide history from us. No,
that's when it started.
It's not when it started. There were people here before what was recorded. It's just been removed
before 1776.
Yes.
Regardless of the reason.
1776. There was
regardless of the reason.
There was the United States of America.
I think the point Sean was making was that today you don't see that today. You can't walk into a place today in the USA.
Right, but what I'm saying is this is where blockchain can fix this, because the reason that there's not those buildings here is because they were purposefully removed, and there's archaeologists that have now tried to prove that, have proven some of it. Some of it was preserved underground and have found it. But
we had civilization here for a long time.
Well, I'm talking about American history. Our
this is part of American history. It's just been hidden from us.
I'm talking. So there was no America.
I think he's talking about the U.S. history,
a more perfect union. Since that time,
he's talking about U.S. history. You guys are talking about 2 different years.
That's the depth of our history. It's a drop in the bucket compared to everyone else. So it's so unfair to judge Americans like you would judge someone from Germany or they have so much more history in their culture than Americans do. And our culture is based on being a mutt and bringing other cultures together and creating our own. And it's crazy and nuts because it was about freedom. Freedom to do what you wanted to do and to pursue happiness that you maybe even couldn't do
part of
into your other cultures.
Yeah, I mean,
where you came from.
Lisa's correct.
To Lisa's point, there was civilization here, right?
And they are part of America. The Native Americans are part of it.
I was just going to say that it's something that's difficult to know for sure, at least, right? It's something that's difficult to know, and that is something, like Lisa said, that blockchain can fix. The knowability.
That's what I was going to, is that blockchain can fix this, and that's what moving forward, there's so much broken in the past. And that's where we can say, people look at the past to predict the future, and it does look very dark, but we have new tools this time. It's not 2008 again. We have Bitcoin now. We have, when this crash happens, there's an option, as we have eternalized this, when things do come out, documents are released, through lawsuits and things like that. We can document history to be able to hold it up. Even if they take a statue down, now we'll have blockchain that we can look at. And when, instead of what do they say, in 2 or 3 generations, history's forgotten or whatever.
Right.
It will still be there when they don't know who Like When Lisa is. And, my grandkids or my great grandkids don't know my name, they can still read the blockchain,
Yeah. Exactly. And there's definitely a strong element of, if there's such thing as an anti-memory hole technology, we're all building it right now. That's where we are.
Yeah. And the things that haven't even been built yet that are going to be based on this. Yep. Definitely.
But as the segue, before we go to the questions, I did put in a new governance issue. I meant to do it a couple of days ago, and I got sidetracked. But we should allow, and I think it's a proposal, to allow people to ask questions or provide topics which are outside of the current episode's theme, since it would be a roundtable. Somebody could come. It's like, hey, we're going to talk about this, but they might come and say, hey, while we're here, can you answer this question? Because I really want to know this thing about it. But it has to be about blockchain, right?
Okay. So the basics are still like it's on. It isn't like where we sometimes go with current events, which is But so blockchain still, but outside of the specific. Okay, cool.
So go vote.
I would be for it. I'm gonna. You know what? I'm gonna vote right now.
Same.
And we can see it update live on the screen there if you refresh after Greg vote. Or I'll go ahead and do
I just voted.
Mine there now. Let's see how quick this takes. This on-chain governance vote. Boom! 3 votes.
3 votes
cool.
already. 32%.
All right. So go vote. I didn't mean to influence anybody else's vote.
And by the way, still upset that Greg
Greg
has more roundtable lot than me. Good.
Oh yeah, I didn't even check.
Well, I always try to drive your show lengths over, Joe.
I'm both upset and proud of that.
Yeah.
Great. How much does Jacob Wayne have?
Yes, that's a good question.
Jacob Wayne's like a.
Well, cool. We got a little demo out of it too. So nice. Anyway, the reason I dug back into that last part of what we were talking about was that it is ultimately related to censorship, which is sort of what we were talking about with current events. And that in itself is something that, depending on how you architect a blockchain, you could help resolve in a fair, equitable, meaningful, realistic sort of way, right? So with that, let's jump into the questions. So we're talking about blockchain architecture. And this is our first questions from Jacob Wayne. And Jacob Wayne asks about white papers. Cool. I love white papers.
Good
topic. Man, maybe that's what I should start doing in my off days for Coffee with Den, is just having a, hey, let's read this white paper today, and just tear it apart or like constructively criticize it or find the merits of the design.
Audiobook, read it into the record, and then talk about it.
Does anybody know the history of white paper or how that got started? Was it originally like a business plan?
It's always been kind of like before Bitcoin even.
White paper's been part of
right?
tech for a long time.
Scientific.
Back to the early days of some of the early protocol improvement proposals that happened for just like the internet protocol.
So it is specific to coding or computer stuff, not just like business plans
scientific.
Scientific.
It's more, it's more a scientific research.
And the white designation was public access. White meant it's open.
Yep.
So,
good information.
With that, is a white paper the most efficient way to put a blockchain's architecture into words and images? Is it something that you can't truly express on paper or place, or as an ever-changing ecosystem of ideas to put into digital reality? So I think what Jacob Wayne is asking is there a better way to do it than a white paper, or is a white paper sufficient to articulate the design of a blockchain thoroughly? I think that it is, because it's sort of meant to be like you can write to it, you can design to the white paper.
Yeah. I mean, and then you have like really interesting examples of it, like the Cult DAO manifesto is a white paper, right? If you read through it, it starts off with this intro that is florid in its language, right? That sort of takes a play on the V for Vendetta speech, right?
Yeah,
the classic one.
But I've heard that one.
But it nonetheless still details the protocol in plain language. And I think that's really the important thing. It's not necessarily so much the format of white paper, but it's the plain language detailing of how a thing should work.
Right. Like if you read Den's white paper, you can get an idea of like how it works under the hood, even though, for example, Den is one of the goals is to make it really like sort of hide the blockchain stuff to an extent, to where that's not such an on the nose feature of what Den is. But if you want to dig into how the guts of it internally really work, even to the point where you can go write your own Den based on that, you can read the white paper and see exactly how it works, and then how it's envisioned, and how it will
without reading the code. Essentially,
without reading the code, right?
It's a plain language written interpretation of the way the code should work. You know, and the idea that it needs to be a paper, right? That it needs to fit on n number of 8.5 by 11 sheets isn't necessarily something we need to hang on to, but the idea itself of the white paper is something that I can't conceptualize how one might explain something at a high level for general audiences in a different way.
I would say I think as most things are, it's imperfect.
Maybe a video.
It's historical. There's precedent for it. People understand. Oh, it's a white paper. I understand kind of generally what to expect. But if you were to make an idea, in my opinion, this is very much an opinion, but an ideal form of it, it would be the same concepts expressed in multiple different forms, directed at one, something that would be a video explainer version, down to something where it tells you some of the reasoning, in printed word with a little more detail, down to a little more technical specs and maybe some formulas and maybe some algorithmic description, then to code finally, right? And the code would even just be a single reference implementation. There might be multiple versions of it. That would be, if you could encapsulate all of those views into one interface, that would be the ideal form. Most of the time it's okay.
An interactive white paper,
a PDF for this. Website. We have code, we have GitHub for that. And they kind of all, together form that thing. Right. So,
a multimedia experience that includes an interactive website with interactive graphics,
and the better interface would be
ideal white paper.
Yeah, because the better interface would even be, I'm in an explainer video, and it's like I have no idea if I'm going to care about this thing that you're going to talk to me about. I see an explainer video, and I'm like, and something deep or interesting to me is stated. I'm like, wait, hold off. What do you mean? It would be beautiful and brilliant if you could go straight from there to the concept, and I say, okay, at that deep level, it's like, well, wait a minute, is that possible? Then show me the code. It's like, holy shit, I did not know. If you could go at that level, that's the idea. Right?
Yeah. Well, have you guys ever seen waitbutwhy.com? Have you guys been there?
No.
Okay, You need to go to waitbutwhy.com and read one of those blog posts, because one thing that they do, or that Tim Urban does with that blog, is have these nested explainers, to where you'll be going along like, so we're going to talk about gas and oil in this context coming up. So here's this thing I'm going to call a blue box, and the blue box is going to go into the history of gas and oil so that you can understand what we're about to talk about. Providing like additional context to bring people into the conversation, I think might be the next phase of white paper, where you really get into the weeds of the problem you're solving in separate contexts.
Something, and this is a little abstract, but something that's very similar is, if you've ever read Humane Interface, and I just looked it up because I couldn't remember his name. Jeff Raskin, the guy who wrote the original Mac interface stuff, that designed all that. It's his ideal interface that he describes in the end, that I don't think anyone's ever built, is that you essentially have a computer screen with interface stuff. Here's a button. And instead of having a hover or some other inefficient technique to tell me what the hell does this mean when it says click me, that you would zoom in on the button. And although at the primary level, I don't see it, but if I zoom in, I can actually get a new interface that is in more depth. And I could even zoom in again. And it's super interesting.
Well, and what I see as interesting too is like what happens with something like Chat GTP, right, where it can write code. What if you ask a question and it responds by rendering an interface?
Yes,
like
that's
you
funny.
could get to some really interesting stuff with that.
Something hilarious there. Sorry, this may be a tangent. There was the post on 4chan about that it is, holy crap, I went there, it generated this code, it's working code, it was it was interface code, and everybody proceeded to trash talk its coding. It was hilarious. Everybody was like, yeah, but that's out of date. That's it's ugly code. Right. It's hilarious.
No, it would be interesting to see if it breaks if you try to get it to deal with like NPM inconsistencies.
Yes,
because those are a nightmare. Package inconsistencies would just be a circus to watch it deal with.
And I assume did the chat? Did the
how do
AI
I fix NPM?
Run?
It just crashes.
Well, did the AI run like a monkey click AI to test this interface to see if it breaks anywhere?
Right. Anyway, it just loads up an instance of eelslap.com and you
Hey, I want to try something that I think it would tie Jacob Wayne's question in with the topic. And I know others might have a short answer on this too, but I know at least Joe does because I've heard him say it before. Talking about white papers, and Joe, you are a blockchain architect. What is it about? What is it about, for example, like the Bitcoin white paper and the Ethereum white paper, right? Let's just take those two conceptually. Can you tell us something that you think is interestingly different between the two architectures, and maybe why it was done one way or the other, or at least what you find interesting about the differences in those two systems, how they're designed?
I don't know if anybody else wants to say something first, but that's something. It's super interesting, but it's pretty simple. At least, and this is my take on it, which it is very focused and directed based upon what I was doing at the time. That the beauty of the Bitcoin white paper and the architecture was that all of the components of it were pre-existing and well known, like well understood. And the magic of it is a relatively simple assembly of advanced single concepts to build something that had never been done before, something very powerful, never been done before. That's what Bitcoin is. And there's more than that, of course. But Ethereum, the interesting thing about it was it takes what Bitcoin left, where Bitcoin specifically, it does have smart contracts in it. They're little snippets, but there are only a few, and they're extremely simple and very well controlled. Why? Specifically because when you're wanting to send money in that way, you don't want complexity. It is reduction of complexity as far as you can, to the point that there is not a Turing complete ability to write generalized code. You can't just write code in Bitcoin in that way. Now, there are ways to do it outside now, various things, right? And there have been a lot of proposals. And I can't remember, there's some history that I didn't follow enough at the time, but when Vitalik left Bitcoin, because he was originally, doing things in the Bitcoin world. And he decided, well, I want to do this, which was, I want to take that same tech. And other things were changed, of course, but the main thing was world computer. The main thing was decentralized Turing complete computer, right?
Yeah.
And that's an interesting concept, especially technically, and as a purist, it's a beautiful thing. It is the fact that it works, even though it sucks in the way it works, is beautiful. It is a beautiful and frankly amazing historical feat. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Now, the issue that I have with it is that wasn't the fucking problem. The fucking problem was getting this tech to do real things, not to make, fucking crypto kitties, right? The real problem in the world is, how do I apply this technology and decentralize that stuff in a way that we can actually put on every tweet and every Reddit post and everything, every event.
Right. And it's a problem of state management, ultimately.
State management, scalability, all those. Right. They're all the things
how much data can you store in this thing and have it still be able to reach what's called consensus, right? The idea that the current state of the world computer is accurately encapsulated in every blockchain node. It's actually a big part of the problem that Rivet was designed to help manage, because like when we first started, we did this we used this technology that came from the 70s for coordinating different instances of databases, which is sort of the biggest problem of blockchain nodes, right? And it's called streaming replication. But the problem with that, when you get into like multiple nodes running, which are just multiple copies of databases that need to be synchronized, was this sort of latency that you get between, and when I say latency, just for people who don't know, I mean like the time it takes to update all the different databases to be the same. And the challenge that we ran into was because things are spreading out across a peer-to-peer network. Like if my node is connected to Joe's node, but there are like 15 nodes all the way to Dave's node, then if I ask a question at the blockchain generally, and it brings back the latest block number from my node, then the next question to ask, okay, give me the balance at latest block number. And that hasn't propagated over to Dave's node. It's going to return the latest block number's balance of an account before it reaches, or before it knows of the latest block that Joe and my node already have, right? There's this sort of gap in time that needs to happen for a peer-to-peer network to update itself. And that was one of the first engineering challenges we had to come up with an answer to in order for our streaming replication system to work. We ultimately solved it, but it was sort of a new challenge to implement an old piece of technology. And that's sort of been the biggest challenge I think the blockchains have faced architecturally, is how to use the history of computing and everything that people have solved in order to make it work to this point to work in the new way that blockchains need them to. And that tends to encompass a lot of people's engineering challenges.
And I'll tell you, one of the failings of the blockchain world, in my opinion, as much of the rest of the world, is that might be closed minds. I don't know what it is. But so often we see the reinvention of things that have been solved before, because people ignore anything that isn't created by the cult leader, right? I mean, if it's not created by whoever the fuck God is now in the crypto world, then it gets ignored.
Which is something that we were that Bitcoin was specifically designed to get away from.
That's why Satoshi disappeared, right?
Yeah. Anyway. Interesting. Greg, you were going off on a technical description of a problem, and I was wondering if we could maybe get into the weeds a little bit further on that, since we're there. If it's not proprietary to Rivet, would you mind?
Oh, no, not at all.
How did you solve that? Did you just geographically distribute different nodes? So
we started off and we had a latency of like 3 seconds when within the different, because we had to run multiple nodes in order to achieve the uptime we wanted to achieve, right? So the problem was, how do we make sure that node number 1 and node number 2 were in sync before we pulled that information into our Kafka instance and piped it to our replica nodes, because our replica nodes were getting out of sync information, right? And we solved that by making sure that we peered them to one another. And that reduced the latency down to like 15 milliseconds, which, you could still hypothetically get 2 queries in a row hit us that managed to break that. But it's such an outside edge case that anybody building their code with a decent failover, like when they get an error, they try again, that it'll not become a problem. And we also reduce that even further with Cardinal, our latest version of it.
I remember you talking about Cardinal.
It's like 3 milliseconds. So there's like basically no way that you would get a race condition on that level of.
So it's hyper reliable.
Yeah, it's hyper coordinated. So there's just a very low latency between different nodes that come into our system. And also Cardinal's just really good at taking in the data in a way that that prevents that from ever being a problem. So, and that I can't even actually understand the level of technical that Austin got into there. So I could.
No, that's great. I appreciate you diving further into that.
A little further, but
yeah, there's also because I had to look it up. I couldn't remember, but Postgres has something called MVCC that's multi-version currency control that it helps with synchronization between databases and even some things inside the same database. If you're there's some really cool, interesting stuff that predates blockchain that I don't know, but whatever. There's some interesting things about it. So,
well, the cool thing now is that we've got that, and it's out in open source land, right? Nobody has to solve that problem again, and that's one of the really powerful things about open source.
That's cool stuff.
Is once somebody solves a big problem, that it's permanently solved as long as people are using the age-old scientific advancement notion of standing on the shoulders, right? As long as you make sure to stand on the shoulders of the people who came before you, then you'll always be solving the problems they already solved without even having to think about them.
There's shoulders that want to be stood upon.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why open source is powerful, right? Because it doesn't just say you can, it says you ought to. A best practice is to use other open source solutions before writing your own.
I remember my first experience with white papers, just to hit back on this question as we go through probably to the next one in a minute. My first experience with white papers, it wasn't really white papers. I was a Tomahawk cruise missile guy in the Navy. Mm-hmm. And, you can imagine you find things to entertain yourself with until you run out of them when you're floating around in the ocean for months at a time. And what we ended up resorting to was we couldn't entertain ourselves on watch with reading books and stuff, but we could always study the technical documentation or the pubs or stuff like that, So we would have these pubs that were really it was that fucking thick, hundreds and hundreds of pages. And we would have just a book on you'd check it out from the Combat Systems Information Center or whatever. Get the pub on how does Tomahawk work? Well, there's a lot in that, Here's the book. And it's literally, it was kind of like reading an extended white paper on exactly how every single thing works. And you could dig in to this one cabinet, this one drawer holds this hardware. How does that shit work? And you flip into it and you have pages that unfold 3 times, and things like that.
It's super cool. So is that the same as the manual at the beginning of the new Top Gun movie where he pulls out the manual for the F-18 and
I'll admit I haven't seen it.
It says by the way, you need to watch it. It's fantastic.
Yeah. That's probably exactly what he's doing.
You guys know this end to end. It's this big thick binder.
Yeah.
And I said, they say, of course. And he drops it in the trash. He's like, so does your enemy.
And every system had books like that, and some of them were classified and some of them were not. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Some of them had the real answer in them, and then you were also told what answer to give if somebody asked you a question to that, or an answer to that question.
Right.
But anyway, that was kind of my intro to how to read a white paper, and so that's also sort of how I got into Bitcoin, floating around in the ocean, doing piracy interdiction for drugs and people and guns and stuff like that. There was a lot of downtime waiting for some ship to board, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And, we had the internet, but it was flaky. So all we could really load was email. That's it. Just email. You couldn't really go surf the web. You could load Yahoo, walk away, get coffee, come back. It's halfway loaded, that kind of thing. Oh, so I tended to pay attention to mailing lists, is my point. And so that's where I learned about Bitcoin. And then since I had so much practice reading the pubs for what I was doing professionally, I was started digging into white papers after a while. First there was just the one with Bitcoin. But then later on, when I was in DC, I started mining and stuff. I was getting into Litecoin, getting into Darkcoin, getting into Feather, getting into this thing that Iceland was trying to do. They were airdropping Aurora, and it was just this explosion back then. But I think, they're pretty good. They give you a really good idea of why this one's being why does it exist? What's the point of doing another one? And sometimes there isn't one, but my answer is to the question of Jacob Wayne's question is yes.
Didn't we have a guy who was into chaos engineering on here once? Who was the creator of it?
That'd be great.
I don't know.
I distinctly remember saying thank you for creating that because it's cool. I know I've met the person who wrote that, and I'm pretty sure it was when they were a guest on here. It might have been Sanger.
I don't know. I don't know if he did the cast stuff. I don't know. I do not know.
Anyway,
any other white paper discussions? Because I got something to end it with, actually.
Let's see.
I just thought about this. I haven't looked at this since Bitcoin 20, whatever year it was, in Miami, and I've never opened it, but it's a roll of toilet paper. And on the this is typical Bitcoin maxi shit, because I used to love running with that crowd. But every square on this roll of toilet paper is a shitcoin white paper, and I just thought it was hilarious.
That's funny.
Because there was this flood of like
most of them. Well, here's the funny thing about what you would call shitcoin white papers. Most of them were copied. Many of them were, in 2017 they would even call out, it's like, this is just a freaking copy of that one. But the funniest
a lot of them are, yeah.
But the funniest thing about that is that it actually devolved into the fact that most of the I don't know what you'd call them. Most of the high volume, high market cap projects are all copies of each other.
I think Tron was a copy paste.
And to a certain degree, right? Copy paste is smart, right? Like we were talking about earlier with open source, copying and pasting is
if you're actually doing something beyond marketing.
If you're advancing it further. Yeah. If you're just iterating on, and honestly, I'm a fan of the idea of like the rebrand as a legitimate change.
Yeah, because are you talking about like Uniswap and Pancake Swap, and all they did is like change the color and the logo,
right? Exactly.
Whatever.
Pure branded forks.
I think it's something that we've gotten away from, that people just need to ask the basic question when there's a new project. Like, hey, we're going to do this. Well, they do that and have been doing that for 3 years. What's different? Why are you better than them? It's like they're already doing it.
We have marketing budget.
Yeah,
we have an in with Sam. We're gonna freaking pump this thing.
A pancake. Right?
Well, that's the thing. Is like the reason that's often the reason to like do your own thing instead of throwing in with somebody else who's already doing the thing, so that you can help out the thing. Help it move it forward.
Ideally, and as much as I talk shit on Litecoin, it was a copy of Bitcoin, but
it's meant to have a different supply,
but it's continued to develop.
I don't even care about that. I don't
even care have a different supply.
Develop after what's his name dumped it all. What I care about is the fact that it has a different algorithm script for a purpose. That the script algorithm was to try to get away from the ability to CPU. I can't remember. But it was
meant to deal with ASICs miners.
There was a reason for it. It was beautiful. Yeah. It is a beautiful thing.
Yeah. The theory was they could change the algorithm if they ever made ASICs for it, so that you could keep it on GPUs, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yes. At the time, I'm going to go one worse than the fact that most of these projects are all copied. I'm going to go one worse. The funniest goddamn thing is we step back and we look at the projects in crypto. Most of them are not even copies of each other, but they're fucking project copies of J.P. Morgan and Goldman Sachs based ventures. So that's the funniest thing.
Yeah. What if we took this anti-centralized banking thing and then we centralized it and made a bank out of it?
Yeah. And I struggled for a while with, like, say, Salt FTX, and a couple of others. I realized Salt as a project. I was like, why do you need and how can you possibly borrow something like crypto? And it's like, Salt was just there strictly for the purposes of a tax mechanism, that I can borrow the money that I need instead of spending my Bitcoin and have a tax event, which is freaking artificial and stupid. And then you look at Celsius and it's literally just usury. And I complain about it. It's like, why does crypto need usury?
Right. Exactly. Why do we need over collateralized loans or under collateralized loans? Like, why do we need that at all? We should stick with over collateralized stuff, right?
But that's a good question. Let's move on to the next one from Juicy J. But that's a good question for white papers in general, is that they should answer is, why do you exist? What's your angle? That kind of thing. So, all right, I love this question. So the question is from Juicy J: what are the 5 architectural components of a blockchain?
Oh,
and the reason that I love this question is because I don't actually care.
Right.
And I think that and I don't mean that in a negative way towards UCJ's question. I mean that, like, it's just not how I think of it, I guess, because it's so, there's so many things going on that I feel like a blockchain could be less than or more than 5 architectural components. And there's things we haven't thought of yet, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But to basically answer the question, does somebody want to take that? Maybe
we can start with the most obvious one, the consensus algorithm, right?
Okay. Yeah. Consensus algorithm. So the consensus algorithm, how do we decide what's true? Like, what is the
how do you
strategy
make
for
all
that?
of these different peers agree, right? Because you've got these peer-to-peer nodes, which probably are, I guess you could say, would be one of the other components, right? The individual instances of the database itself is almost an architectural element to its own right. But the consensus algorithm or consensus mechanism is what's designed to make all those nodes agree, right? That's
the nodes being another component. The network itself being consisting of independently operated nodes, usually in the decentralized case. There's centralized versions too.
Right. You've got the cryptographic security mechanism, right? Each of these things is encrypted. The entire point of it is cryptographic security enhanced with the security of consensus. And there's like the block timing mechanism, right? I would say that's a different one.
This would be like the difficulty level, difficulty that changes depending on how much hash power is being put in. That control mechanism, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
That was one of the things that I was impressed with Bitcoin was there was this idea of like, how do we solve for global time synchronization? And that kind of was it, was the dynamic difficulty setting, right?
Yep.
Absolutely. So that's 4, right? We've got there's 4 of them.
Right. And you've got the public-private key wallets is a separate one, even though that's still part of the cryptographic security.
Yeah. So the user experience, the user interface, because there's different types of people using it too. And so you need a way to access and to interface with.
And then there's the state management, which is like the block size stuff. Is that all 5? Did we get all 5?
That's like 6. So
there's
overachievers.
I don't think there are a concise number of components. There are a lot. It's depends on how you break them down. Yeah,
it's a good question. And I think that's.
I mean,
it's a good question. It's worth taking it apart and seeing what's going on.
And sorry, I added it's Christmas delivery stuff. So, but what are the core? The blocks themselves. And I was asked in a very early interview, and I had trouble describing it in a way at the time that was easily understood by normal people. But why are there blocks in a blockchain, right? Why are there blocks? And the interesting thing in the end is that the blocks assemble a series of transactions, and you can have an algorithm then that can be deterministic. So how do we decide which of these transactions is legitimate, not a double spend, not impossible, not illegal, whatever else? And the blocks let you arrange them in a window of time or a window of state, however you would describe that. So you have a series of transactions that, by my algorithm, what matters is which one came first. Or maybe your algorithm is, let's say there's a double spend, so you accept the biggest one.
I guess probably another architectural component is you need an uncle resolution mechanism. And that's probably another component that gets under talked about. What happens when you have 2 valid blocks presented to different parts of the network at the same time?
Right.
How do you resolve which one is actually the next block?
This is the longest chain wins thing.
Yeah. Well, you can have longest chain wins. There's one that we worked on with the folks at ETC was this modified exponential subjective scoring mechanism, which was actually a way to say block length with a modifier or the length of the chain with the modifier is how you decide which uncle is the one you go with.
Because it is interesting. You might have a fork where one side of the fork has a teeny bit of the network interacting with it, and that's probably not as legitimate as even if it's a shorter side that has all of the network hitting it until they resolve, right? So
Yeah, you guys remember when ETC got attacked with the 51% attacks, right?
Yeah.
The way that they did that attack was pretty clever. They took a chain offline, or segregated it from the rest of the network, and they went through and they, with their side network, hashed through all of these different valid blocks, and then all at once dumped them onto the network, and it created a longer uncle with their 51% attack.
And it came back in with more hash power.
Essentially,
and more consensus.
It did what the blockchain does to resolve those, which is essentially like a retcon, right? It goes back and rewrites from the block where there's this fork and says, like, this branch is actually the one we should pursue as the valid one. And they used off the shelf hashing power they purchased from a GPU provider. You
can just rent it for like an hour.
Yeah.
And it's relatively cheap because
they got far enough ahead that they were able to dump it all back on the network. And
that by the way, that's one of the reasons Dragon Chain's architecture was laid out like it is, because we didn't want to rely on way back at the beginning on knowing that we'll have enough hash power or other network measure to prevent attacks, that we wanted both in algorithm diversity to be able to, to leverage advancements like, say, what Ethereum Classic, did to counter some of those attacks, as well as the hash power of something like Bitcoin, or the network power of something like Ethereum. And it's interesting because of that. And it's, I still think it's the best, most scalable way to do it. But it relies on those individual projects to,
And that's interesting too, because it's almost like, and this is the way that I would love for us to become as a community. It's kind of like the different chains are watching each other's back a little bit.
Yeah, that'd be nice, wouldn't it?
And I think Lisa, Litecoin's doing some of that too, where isn't Litecoin either providing or using a different chain to timestamp as well to prevent 51% attacks?
I don't know. I'm not the person to ask about that. I know a little. I mean, I know a little bit about it. I'm not like into the technical stuff. I keep up with the development on like the MWeb stuff, the OmniLite, Taproot, but I'm not sure how it all technically plays out. I'd have to ask. I know
at the very least, there's some projects using Litecoin as delegated proof of work, which is similar to what Joe was talking about. Another chain that you could checkpoint onto, like Pirate Chain, for example, does checkpointing on Litecoin to leverage their network, their proof of work for their chain. Just in case there's like an attack, because they use the same thing that Zcoin and I guess Ethereum also use. And so that's their two different mechanisms, just in case one of them falls over, that kind of thing. And somebody mentioned, I think it was you just now, Lisa, we were talking about the different components of blockchain. I think we've blown through like 7 of the 5 so far, but we could keep going. There's all kinds of things that solve particular problems and that are important or not so important, depending on what the point of that particular project is. One of those is the concept of like a master node versus a regular node, or a service node, as some projects call them, which can provide services that may be hybrid and not directly on chain, but are still checkpointed and validated on chain.
Oracles are examples of that.
What's that?
Oracles are kind of examples of that.
Oracles, Oxen service nodes, which drive like LokiNet traffic in exchange for compensation with the Oxen blockchain. It also doubles as their proof of stake nodes at the same time. I'm just trying to think what could we rattle off? What am I not thinking of, Sean? There's different stuffs that different blockchains do that need a different component to solve for that.
Yep, and it does depend on whether or not you're using a proof of stake mechanism for consensus or a proof of work mechanism for consensus. A lot of that, the other pieces that you need to connect to it are different depending on what kind of consensus mechanism you use.
Yeah, and I think I've said it a couple of times, but I'll say it again just to try to drive it home. I think that depending on the point of your project, there's very good reasons for proof of stake and for proof of work, depending on what you're trying to do.
Can I mention one? Sure. Network scarcity, which is never really mentioned out in the regular world. And I'm not talking about scarcity of the token. I'm talking about the worker that almost all of them have a piece of hardware, which is the central point for scarcity, that if you want to scale up Ethereum, you have to apply more hardware. I should say Bitcoin.
And that's one of the things that Rivet helps to solve, right? Like that's what cardinal nodes are ultimately. Like we need two nodes that are actually on the chain in order to have a stable instance of cardinal, and we can scale by expanding out these replicas, and they can go to the edge of like whatever AWS can provide us. But
and that's why we applied time, because we on Dragon Chain we solved it with time, which is there's a scarcity that is not hardware related, so you can throw it on a on cloud and not worry. You can scale it up and down, and you don't have to worry about it being unfair because it's all time based. So
Dave, you're talking about that project they use Litecoin as like a secondary validator.
Yeah, I was talking about Pirate Chain.
Okay, well,
which is a fork of Zcash.
Could you have a proof of stake network and then use the proof of work as that's pretty cool.
Yes, you could. Yeah, you can.
What Dragon Chain does.
You can. Yep. Exactly. Yeah, Dragon Chain uses time, which is arguably a form of proof of stake. I just think it's better than using a token that you can just go out and purchase. But yeah, Dragon Chain uses Bitcoin to leverages the hash power on Bitcoin, and also leverages the stake power, I guess, now on Ethereum. Yeah, and also leverages the centralization on Binance Smart Chain. So you get three different varieties. You get three different, you can call them checkpoints on three different chains that are additional independent validations of what is on Dragon.
I just came to something. You know what we should do? We're talking to Interop. Dragon Chain should add a Federal Reserve L5 node.
Hell yeah!
There we go.
We have proof of blood
Swift node. This is our
bullets, whatever you led. I don't know what you want to call it, but
proof of BS.
Proof of cartelization.
I mean, it's literally though. If we could get a transaction that would be if there were, I guess whatever would be public. I don't know. You'd have to figure out something. But if there's a way to get it into the regular banking system in a provable way.
Yeah. Well, let's go there. There's maybe not there specifically, but since you're talking about like what other things could you leverage? We talked about Litecoin, where you're delegated proof of work with them. Dragon Chain does something similar with Bitcoin, for example. We've talked about something like Monero, or something like, could be Pirate Chain, could be whatever. whoever has an interesting enough network to want to leverage. It could be useful to do something like, with Bitcoin, it's all transparent. Anybody can go see anything, but you could do the same thing with Monero, where like you can't see it until you want someone to see it, until it's challenged, or Taproot, or if you got into what Taproot's doing, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. There's proof of, they call it proof of space and time, where like Chia and some others are using hard drives, plotting. If you've heard people like plotting instead of mining, that kind of thing. Yeah. There's all these different approaches to like.
Guys was rollups and zero knowledge proofs. Like that's kind of another.
Yeah, the zero knowledge stuff's really interesting too. I haven't taken the time to learn it or understand it as much as I don't even know if I could, but I haven't tried.
I mean, the ZK rollup is, it uses cryptography, right, to hide the actual details of what's in a thing, right, in your rolled up your rolled up set of transactions and interactions that go into a single block. But it's essentially a way to compress a whole bunch of stuff happening down into either a transaction that similar to the way that the Dragon Chain proves to the proves records a hash to Ethereum. But
so there's compression involved with that.
And I want to add in something that's an interesting, and this is a very philosophical point that applies to all of these things, that there are, and I have a very specific angle about how I build systems, even before blockchain, that I prefer structural. It's almost like, okay, yes, I could build that swing set, but if I can actually feel the structure, I start to build it, and it's like, that's not really strong. I need some support there, that type of thing.
Right.
It's very similar with software. You can find the places where there are levers or even hinges, things that can move in the software. And those are the places you pay attention to. You want them to move so that they can be flexible for certain things. But you also, in some cases, well, wait, this is the foundation. This needs to be lockable.
Right. Some things you want the state to be able to alter how it works, and some things you want to be agnostic to state.
And I will say that engineers, and especially academic engineers, very often will focus on the mathematical side of that. And I found that in real life, the structural trumps the mathematic leaps and bounds. Not only because it's simpler to understand and to implement, typically, that's kind of a hard to measure thing. It's more often that the mathematical has many unknown unknowns, like say with the ZK rollup. You don't know when it'll break, and sometimes it doesn't matter the way you're using it.
Right. Yeah. The structure always has to backstop mathematics.
Well, you think about it. Right? It took so long to get to that level. Oh, we need these layer 2s. We need to do this.
Ultimately, something has to come back down to a 0 and a 1. Otherwise, you're going to have instability.
And the way that we use it, and the way that I would say is architecturally superior, although it wouldn't be I wouldn't want it to be the only way. I would want both, obviously, because the toolkit needs to be free. But the fact that you can hash the damn thing, store it over here, and just fucking put the hash on, and it's structurally superior because I know there are no unknowns. Now you might still have a hash issue. There are things that go wrong there.
Yeah, you can.
It's still math, but the beauty is I can hold this shit. I can then use that as an extra.
If you can always reduce it back to a true or a false, is the important thing.
And that's the beauty, that separation is what I wish that the Ethereum community would just accept. They will in time, just like they accepted the fact that they couldn't scale Ethereum as it was.
Technically, I'm an Ethereum guy, right? I accept that.
Yeah. Well, I know, you do. So, but it's just, but if you go on fucking
they also
Reddit,
don't let me talk it.
If I go on fucking Reddit to the Ethereum subreddit, I'll be banned for saying this shit. It's like, you're an apostate, you're freaking evil. This is This is like the Uncle Buck blasphemer teacher guy.
And isn't it ironic that that's the thing we're not supposed to be? That's part of the reason to build all of this shit.
And that's why I will tell you, the more I think about it, if we in this industry as a community, as a general community, we're more open to studying how tribal, especially, I don't know what you'd call it, what the actual classification is, but when you have tribe,
about the tyranny of structurelessness, right?
Yeah, well, because it's like I'm thinking back, and for whether or not historical accuracy is part of it. Braveheart's a good movie. And you go look at Braveheart, and you see, and the great thing is you can really understand why the fuck couldn't these guys just come together and defeat their fucking enemy, Right. And it's because they're tribal. It's like, nope, it's our clan.
Right. My tribe has to be the dominant tribe in our solution.
It's our clan. And that's what then they fucking use.
The enemy exploited that
against us
to win.
And and that's and it's the whole thing, because I was thinking that through. It's like, if these fucking any one of them were saying, stand up and say, look, I'm an Ethereum guy, and yet there's value to all these other projects, and we need to be working together, because otherwise we're all going to get fucked.
Exactly.
Nobody will do it.
That's exactly.
A lot of them are paid. A lot of them are in the game and playing the game, and we've seen that. That's what everybody is praising Sam for fucking ever. Vitalik still has a ton of weird things that don't add up. And I think he's brilliant, but some of the shit that he does not add up.
Right.
And on another,
and honestly, like Vitalik used to be a lot better about this stuff, and then he got freaking. No offense to this guy, actually, total offense to this guy. If he's watching, fuck off, buddy. Vlad Zamfir got in his ear and kind of ruined his ideas about unstoppable code. They're just elements of that ecosystem that are in there to create tribal division.
The same thing happens from like the spoke of, or the, from the angle of like a Bitcoiner to a maximalist, that kind of thing. I've had conversations that I just for the life of me, man, I couldn't get past this sort of like, well, number one, it's all about money and they're not interested in anything else. Yeah, which is fine though.
But even more than that, it's about pride and
there's that too, pride. Yes, but like a lot of these things that you're against aren't even trying to compete with you. They're not even. Some of them aren't trying to be. Some of them aren't trying to do what you're doing.
90% of that bullshit comes from people who aren't building. They're just. I was like, I'm a crypto bro. I'm gonna go out and have a party with my fucking Bitcoin buddies because we can all
going back and forth with.
They just want their Lambos and their yachts and they're happy.
Yeah. Well, because I will tell you, I had a conversation. I'm not gonna tell you who it was or what it was about, but a New York Times columnist reached out because I've talked to him before.
So a moron. He
comes out. He's a smart guy. He reached out and he had talked to me before because I'll give him good info, right? The one time they mentioned us and the editor cut it. Surprise! Right? They probably looked at my Twitter feed. And
okay, said, so the editor's
not going to quote this guy. And his whole thing was looking for an interesting project after FTX, or tell me what's to kind of get a feel to let these readers know what do crypto people think about what's going on. And I told him, okay.
God, this conversation needs to get
colorful, something that's super exciting. A normal person would be excited about this project. It's very interesting. It's easy to explain in a way that a normal person could understand. It's something that is valuable to the world. It's a positive, even if it is focused on one little area. And it's very, very crypto. It is all about using all of these things for crypto. And this project is not announced. This would be a good thing to talk about. He's like, no, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about like if I went and sat down at a bar at a meetup or something, he's like, you just want to talk to crypto bros about is Bitcoin dead? Is it coming back? When's it coming back? When do I invest? And I asked him that, and he's like, oh, well, no, but that's what he was wanting.
It's hard to get away from that. It's almost impossible sometimes. And
it's poisoned our well to a certain degree.
Yes. I went back and forth with this guy that a lot of people listen to. We were just back and forth in my DMs on Twitter, and all I was trying to do was get him to stop shitting on things that aren't doing what he's doing, that aren't doing what Bitcoin's doing. You know what I mean? Right. It's like, great, you're competitive. But these things that you're talking shit about are not even trying to do what Bitcoin's doing. They're trying to do something completely different that isn't even money at all.
Well, as a rule, man,
it was Bitcoin Tina, if you know the personality.
Maximalism, sexism, racism, they share a lot of traits, man.
Yeah, and Bitcoin Tina said money's enough. That's all he cares about. He said money's enough. Like, fix the money, fix the world. And that's all I care to think about. And nobody's allowed to do anything else with blockchain or cryptocurrency except money.
Which is bullshit.
And I was just like, bro, you're this like idealist personality.
To me, that's saying, like you said, there's nothing else wrong with the world. I got in the same argument with a Bitcoin maximalist person. I was like, so you're saying that, contracts, there's nothing wrong. Like, I can tell you, I've been in contracts and that things have gone wrong. I mean, you're saying that the court systems are flawless. Right. You're saying there's so many other.
It's all money.
Yeah. Wow.
It's all the same problem anyway. It's the problem of trust. Trust is broken. That's the thing that bothers me, is that it's really about trust being broken.
Well, we've at least demonstrated that more and more every time something explodes and melts down, because it was built on the very thing we were trying to get rid of. Yep. I can only hope that either people are going to run away who don't really care, or they're going to be like educated
right.
by
and run
by the events.
All you want, because it's coming for you, whether or not you turn your face to it. Right. Ultimately, the system is going to have what the system is going to have, and you can either be at the table or you can be on the menu. And if you're thinking the problem is just money, then you are on the menu for everything else.
Yep. Cool. Well, let's. What do you say we cut it there? We're at time, and that is all the questions we've gotten through. That was a really good discussion. I hope we didn't like lose too many people, but I love diving into technical details of stuff like that. So
it's fun.
That was great for me.
Yep. And if anybody has any questions left over from that, like, let's keep talking about it. Let's bring any of those specific things back up in topics for future episodes. We can go drill down to the bottom of the rabbit hole until we get to the first principles, and when we get there, we'll have some answers everybody can comprehend. So like if you heard us talking about something today you'd understand, write it down, put it in a question. We'll put it in a topic suggestion for a future episode, and we'll go deeper.
We're really close to that vote passing, by the way. So
yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah, thanks for everybody voting on that for sure. Cool. So thank you.
49.66%.
How many? 49.6.
Yep.
We need somebody else who has a lot to go in there and vote. You
don't
have to vote yes. You can vote no if you want. But
yeah. Totally.
Yeah. The way that works is as soon as it gets over 50, then it resolves. Like, or if there's nobody else that if there's nobody else that can possibly sway it after that, it'll pass.
Yeah, we should have waited until after this episode to throw our votes in, then we could have just pushed it.
Cool. So thanks all the hosts for hosting, for being here. Really appreciate the conversation today. Where can people follow you, and do you have any updates for you? Let's go to our friend Satoshi Sean first, and then we'll go Lisa, Greg, Joe, and then I'll be the last one standing.
You can follow Satoshi Sean on YouTube and Twitter and Instagram and all that. Probably do the crypto meme review this weekend. That's about it.
Thank you.
Keeping it short
I do love
and
memes. I do love memes. So that's something.
You can send me the memes on Twitter or Instagram, Telegram, any of the grams. And
I put a couple in the memes layer, Sean, that I think would be good for this week.
Okay, I'll check it out, and then I'll shout you out on the show.
Feel free to post the best ones over to the memes layer. I usually scrape them from Biz or something, so we all have different sources.
Still, the best one is that metaverse in real life.
That was pretty good.
Yeah, I think about that all the time, man.
That reminded me of there's this YouTuber, I guess, who does like real life NPC person, where they're like what you would look like. It's just live action, video game characters look like. It reminded me of that basically, but it wasn't planned. It was just how it was.
Yeah.
Awesome. So Lisa, how about yourself? Do you have any updates for us, and where can people follow you?
You can find me on Twitter and on Den.Social at Lisa Mighty Davis, and in the Mighty Lair on Den.Social. And I've been posting a little bit in the conspiracy theory layers. Of course, that's anonymous, so you don't know which one's me.
Well, now I know.
But,
nice.
Yeah.
All right.
That's been fun, poking around in there and contributing there. And then I've got my show every weekday, 5:00 Central. And we've got more. We had another episode, the part 3 of the Amicus, unpacking the Amicus for the Very DAO. So you can go to the Very DAO YouTube channel and watch that. And we had a recent interview with Nick Morgan from ICANN. And
5 Central or 4 Central?
5 Eastern. I'm sorry, 4 Central. Thank you, Sean.
You threw me on that one because I'm on one of those.
Sorry.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. We need to do a catch up for Tuesday. Yeah. Hopefully we can get that done this weekend too. But yeah, lots of good stuff. And on my Den.Social, on the Mighty Lair, we have like a contest. So if I'm trying to get better at it, do a weekly post, like a little TV guide thing. And the top comments on that, you go, watch the show during the week or whatever, and then make a comment about one of the shows that you watched during the week. And those top comments get locked on the happy hour show on Friday. So we review and check in with everybody's comments and see what they have to say. So
sweet. Thanks for doing that.
New piece.
Thanks for doing that. And I enjoyed our conversation about the Titanic conspiracy that we had yesterday morning.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I missed that. I could go off on that one.
There we go. Next time.
Why did they include that in the movie? Why was that not in the freaking movie?
That was my point. That was my point exactly.
Greg, how about yourself, sir? Where can
you can find me at
you
can find me at Design Heretic wherever good times are had. I'm typically on Twitter or Den, but everywhere else you can find that. You can find me if you find me on LinkedIn at that. You'll find that I don't say very much, but occasionally I repost something from Den or Twitter there. As far as what I'm up to this week and what I think everybody needs to get up to this week, Julian Assange is like 2 weeks or less from actually getting sent to the United States at this point, in the worst case. And people need to get out there and they need to voice their opinions. We finally got the mainstream media, I hate calling it mainstream media, more like the regime media, talking about it a little bit. But if you have an opinion on this, and I think you should, get out there and say something, because as soon as he gets here, you can imagine that he's going to be in a communications management unit, the CMU units in U.S. prisons, make it so that you can't even have visitors. He's going to be put through the kind of hell that very few human beings get to ever experience. And if we don't get that stopped, then that's going to happen to him, and he's going to be the test case for every single journalist they want to silence going forward. So get out there right now and say something, because it's almost too late.
That jerk Trump should have pardoned him.
He should have.
Trump. It's if somebody really wanted to stick it to that guy, they would pardon him. They could stick it to Trump and stick it to the Republican Party. That would make all those people really mad.
Look at that Candace Owens interview of Trump, where she asks him why you pardon all these freaking rappers. Why'd you not pardon Julian freaking Assange? And his excuse was bullshit. It was craziness. It was like,
I think he was trying to play ball and just.
I think they probably threatened to assassinate him.
Yeah.
But they've tried to assassinate him multiple times.
I think he just tried to make nice with the intelligence.
Don't play nice with those fuckers, man.
Whatever the reason, there is
another person he should. Albrecht. He was
trying
to play nice.
Should have gotten a pardon, and Snowden should have gotten a pardon.
Whatever the reason, there is a pretty obvious unspoken reason for
there's war on the cyberpunks.
I was trying to use reverse psychology in order to make it seem like, hey, you could really stick it to them.
Well, whatever your reason is, go for it.
I mean, I don't know if it's a black pill or not, but I mean, far more than Biden being a puppet is the fact that our nation is a freaking puppet, of whom I don't know if we know. But it is a puppet state. It's almost obvious. Those three people are kind of.
Actually, if you want to learn more about this, guys, there's a subject called the duality of power in democratic states like the United States. You can learn about it on wikispooks.com. They get into it pretty extensively, especially if you look up a subject called state crimes against democracy.
Or just go watch the recent Whitney Webb interviews and buy the books, One Nation Under Blackmail, Volume 1, Volume 2.
Yes. Oh, One Nation Under Blackmail. That's the one. I was also I was put onto this whole subject by.
You can watch a movie that just
State Crimes Against Democracy
on HBO Go called Amsterdam. It's a phenomenal movie. Loved it. It was amazing.
Really?
People that are
in
those
it, books, Lisa? Are they awesome?
People that are in it is weird. The cast is crazy.
I'm obsessed.
But it's a true story. Awesome. It's a true story that happened. Yeah, and when you watch it, it will make you sad. Oh. It's World War One. After World War One, the veterans came. This is real. This is real. This happened.
Watch this.
It came back, and then there was a conspiracy to turn. This is pre-Hitler, to turn the United States into Mussolini and Hitler, using the veterans that came back. And
interesting.
It really happened.
Interesting. And I would be interested. I don't know anything
Amsterdam.
About that. Yeah.
I texted it to you last night. We watched it for family night. It was shocking to me, the similarities between then and now.
I just got the video about
John, send me
Ashton
those.
Kutcher or whatever.
And the only thing that stopped it was when they was called the Council de Fünf, Council of Five, and they approached this general and they were trying to get him to do the speech, and then these veterans, Batman and ironically, Harley Quinn and their friend, they're vets. They went to the general, and then they uncovered this. It's Mike Myers is in it. It's the cast is crazy, but it's a really hilarious, good, well written movie. But the fact that it actually happened, and in the end, it has the general giving a speech before Congress after he exposed all these titans of industry, all the Jeff Bezoses, and all these people. They tried to do this before, and they almost succeeded, but they were stopped.
Well, that is a 5-star review if I ever heard one. Yeah. Shout out to Amsterdam on HBO Go. Sounds like I'll be watching that and seeing what that's about. Yep. Awesome. Working our way around, Joe, where can people follow you and get updates, or do you have updates for us?
Refollow me on Twitter. I'll get a few hundred followers and then I'll lose a few hundred followers over and over again. Unfollow me on LinkedIn. I think I'm going to withdraw from LinkedIn. I'm just
it's the most unused social media platform.
I'm sure my Facebook profile is public again. Every 6 months or so, it goes back to public so that people can see all my political posts and stuff without me actually doing that. And then I'm Joe on Den.Social, where it probably matters most. And let's see here, updates. There's probably a good discussion on the Den.DAO call this afternoon. I have at least one thing that to bring up that I'm trying, I guess we're trying to figure out if we should make the formal proposal to make the automated change for some of the things that seem to have been working to counteract some of the, brigading attacks that some have experienced in the economy. And gosh, there's a couple of projects that we're working on. We're getting closer to going public with. I know one. It's outside of my control. It's a customer project. Super exciting, neat, fun. Amazing, and it's supposed to be launching beginning of the year, where it would have a public interface and things like that. And then there's another project that we're working on that's my personally favorite project ever, that we're getting finally further along in code and a couple of partnerships and things in place to roll out. So
I think I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah. So that's it. I think that's it. Make sure go read WikiLeaks. Because Greg forgot to say that, and don't be tribal.
I love it. Thank you, Joe. My name is Dave. I introduced myself in a way that I didn't at the beginning of this episode as a U.S. Navy veteran. I don't usually talk about that much, but I wanted to quickly put on my chevrons again and just say that if there's anybody out there watching in the military, in the government, that doesn't think what we've been talking about is as important as we've been saying it is. I've had my ear to the ground since I was 10 on computers and the internet and where all this stuff was going. Early 2000s, we ran scenarios with the Navy, and I showed my captain the implications of some of the new types of information warfare that were exploitable by our adversaries. And today I can say confidently that there's just never been anything as interesting as what Bitcoin has inspired. And that genie's out of the bottle. And if we don't embrace it and make the US a driving force in adopting that technology to protect ourselves at a national security level, if we don't take the opportunity to cultivate domestically that market and that industry, we're not going to be the dominant force on the planet for that much longer. I just know it. So we've got to do better than what we're doing today. So that's what I'll go out with. There's my plug.
Xi and Saudi Arabia met yesterday, so we're not far behind.
All right.
They're stabbing us back.
Join the WBRT layer. If you haven't subscribed, that's why you can't post. On Den, you have to subscribe to a layer before you can post to it. So join that to ask questions for next week. our theme is going to be another one of my favorites, which is privacy coins. So we'll get into that next week. Think of questions you want us to address, things you want to get discussed on the show. And then once you see that post go up for next week's episode 82, lob them at us, give us the questions, and then bring some friends in and say, hey, Den's free. Ask your questions. They'll answer them, or we'll talk about them anyway, even if we don't.
Sound like Attenborough. The lob them at us.
Lob them at us.
The lob them at us.
Yeah, hit that like button, hit that follow button, hit that alarm bell. By all means. Let
YouTube know that this is here. Like it, subscribe to it, and all of that stuff.
And put a comment below so that we can see how many people.
And watch it 10 times. Yeah. Because YouTube will only count it once. So
that's right.
Awesome. Yeah, actually, that's a good point. That is how we distribute lot tokens, though, right? Yeah. So we heard us talking about, if you aren't familiar, you heard us talking about voting on stuff. That's how you get them. So the more views that we get, the more that you participate and get questions in, the more lot that goes out to the community. And that's how we do it. And that's all I've got. Thanks, everybody. Have a good one. See you next week.
While nuclear weapons states can exert unlimited violence over even millions of individuals, strong cryptography means that a state, even by exercising unlimited violence, cannot violate the intent of individuals to keep secrets from them. Cryptography is the ultimate form of non-violent direct action.